Welcome back here from New Orleans Center Radio Row, getting ready for Super Bowl 59. Andrew, Ailey, Ian, Riley back with you as we are approaching our third hour of the day here inside the Convention Center in New Orleans. We've got another Syracuse alum guest joining us right now, very connected to this weekend's game. Zach Berman, Syracuse alum, WAER, and Daily Orange alum, joins us now. He's a Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter. Zach, first off, thanks for joining us. Second, let's get right into this big game this weekend because you're covering the Eagles all year long. What's it been like to cover this year's Eagles team?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thanks for having me. This is awesome. Proud Newhouse alum. So I see Newhouse School of Public Communications. Mm-hmm. I'm just envious. They didn't have this when I was young, right? I would have loved the trip to the Super Bowl. What's like? So I've covered the Eagles for 13 years, and
wow.
in these 13 seasons, this is their third Super Bowl. So I don't want to act like I'm getting used to it, but it's much different the third time around because you're used to it, right? You kind of know what to expect. So the question was about the season. I would tell you this is a season that I expected it to end here, right? I mean, the way they were built going into the year. I remember I was down at the owners' meetings in Florida back in March, and Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie was saying, that all the ingredients were there, and it's true. They signed Saquon Barkley. Now, I didn't know Zach Bond was going to be Defensive Player of the Year candidate. The Eagles didn't either, but the talent that they had, the way last season ended, they made changes. But I mean, this is a team that 2 years ago was on the doorstep of winning. Last year they were 10-1. The season collapsed. If you just look from a roster perspective, they're as deep a roster as there is in the NFL. So I thought there was a decent chance that I would be here talking about the Eagles.
Obviously an unbelievable offseason. You already highlighted the diamond in the rough that they landed in Zach Bond. A guy who was not a diamond in the rough was Saquon Barkley. And I know
that transition, well done.
Thank you. Thank you. We do learn a few things, between all the other things that we do. But what were your initial impressions of that signing? Mm-hmm. Obviously, seeing him dominate in the NFC East for years. And did you expect him to have this kind of season?
Yeah. So I liked the signing when they made it for a few reasons. First off, I believe in paying A players A money. I think the problem in free agency is when you pay B players A money or C players B money. But Saquon Barkley's an A player, and they paid him A money. Now, historically, the Eagles haven't paid running backs, right? But if you just look at the way the market's adjusted, and Howie Roseman, the team's GM, has spoken about this, that the going rate for a top running back now is essentially comparable to a number 3 wide receiver, right? If you just look at what the free agent
12 to 15.
Exactly. So the Eagles paid Saquon $13 million a year, 26 guaranteed over 2 years, and so it made sense there when you look at how they allocate resources. Now, there's I covered the Eagles back in 2015 when they signed DeMarco Murray, who was coming off, leading the league in rushing
season
for the Cowboys, and it did not work. So free agency, there is that unknown, but I thought the variables were in place for Saquon to do real well in Philly. First off, he was improving offensive line. He was improving the quarterback he played with. Jalen Hurts, the +1 in the running game, is such a big element. And I just thought, too, that he was a good personality fit, which I didn't necessarily know when they signed him. I had only spoken to Saquon at that point, in like group interviews. But
sure.
I spent some time in Saquon's hometown, which is actually right by Philly. Back in August, I spent some time with Saquon. And you really got to see, all right, this is someone who's going to fit within the fabric of the locker room. And so the other part of your question, did I see this coming? I didn't see 2,000 yards coming, but I thought Saquon was going to have the best season of his career just on the conditions that were in place.
I think staying with the offense, Kellen Moore, one of the NFL's great offensive minds right now. What has he done for this Philadelphia team, and do you think you're going to lose him after this season?
I do think the Eagles are going to lose Kellen Moore next week. I think he's actually going to stay here. And he's going to become the Saints head coach, which, interestingly, 2 years ago, the Eagles were playing the Super Bowl in Arizona, and Jonathan Gannon, stayed and became the coach of the Cardinals. So it's funny how it works out. If you're a coordinator the next time the Eagles are in here, you shouldn't get a return flight home. But Kellen Moore, look, I don't want to say I've been underwhelmed by him this year. He hasn't necessarily had the effect that I had anticipated. I agree that he's a bright mind. I think, though, there's a lot of questions. Is it Nick Sirianni's offense? Is it Kellen Moore's offense? The reality is it's Jalen Hurts' offense, right? And I think they do a lot to accommodate Jalen Hurts within that offense. And then they adjusted as the year went on in terms of leaning more to the run, relying on the offensive line, relying on Saquon Barkley. So some of the concepts that you saw in the past from Kellen Moore, you don't necessarily see this year. That said, their answers against the blitz are much better than they were a year ago. I thought the best game Kellen called was the championship game last week against Washington.
Unbelievable.
But he is one and done, right? I mean, Kellen Moore I'm expecting him to be the next head coach of the Saints.
Well, you've spent double-digit years covering the Eagles, and for 7 seasons you were their beat writer. You came out with a book in 2018, Underdogs, the Philadelphia Eagles' emotional road to the Super Bowl victory. What's that all about, and how can you relate that to this season as well?
Sure. So, I was at the Philadelphia Inquirer for 7 years, from 2012 to 2019. I was at The Athletic from 2019 to 2023, and now I'm at a place called PHLY, where I'm trying to be like you guys and be on camera all the time, right? My first book was called Underdogs, and that was chronicling the Super Bowl season, so really behind the scenes here. Then I have a book actually that just came out called The Franchise. This is the paperback version. I should have brought the hardcover, but this is on the last 25 years of the Eagles, and I think both books are applicable in kind of why they're here. Because you can see how the organization was built over these past 25 years. So we're talking here a few days before the Eagles play the Chiefs, when Andy Reid is coaching against the Eagles. This book here starts in 1999 when the Eagles hired Andy Reid, right? And you get into why Jeffrey Lurie hired then the quarterbacks coach for the Packers, who didn't have any head coaching opportunities. You find out why they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round. You find out the process for hiring Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman's whole backstory. And then the first book, you can see certain parallels about kind of the rise to building a Super Bowl team, the conditions that have to be in place. Now, the thing is, that Super Bowl book, the 2018 one, I knew how it ended, right? And so you can kind of chronicle the Philly special and all that goes into it. For this season, I don't know how it's going to end yet, and so maybe if all of us are talking next year, there's a third book. We'll see, but I think the cool thing about the book is you can broaden the lens and you can connect the dots after the fact.
Go ahead, Ayla.
So what takeaways from both books, I guess, do you think you can apply to the journey that the Eagles have gone on this year and this season? Yeah,
good question. So for the first one, I would say the way the team was able to persevere is kind of like a generic term. It's kind of like a cliche term, but that year they lost Jason Peters, right? They lost Darren Sproles, they lost Carson Wentz, and invariably during the course of a season, you're going to have forms of adversity, right? And ultimately, you're measured by how you respond to that. I think back to that 2017 season. Doug Peterson needed the win early on. It seemed to keep his job. After the season opener, they carried. They dumped Gatorade on his head. They carried him off the field, right? Nick Sirianni this year was at a point after Week 4 where the Eagles were 2-2. They didn't know if he would keep his job, and so the way you respond to that is something you can take from that 2018 team. And then I think from this book, from the franchise, really the roster buildings. What jumps out to me is Howie Roseman's aggressiveness, the way Jeffrey Lurie, the team's owner, wants the organization thinking in terms of their transactions, in terms of their cap allocation. And I think, part of professional sports that really fascinates me, and it's actually like college sports now, is how to build a roster and how are you spending your resources, who's required to do X, Y, and Z, what are you looking for. Howie always talks about this. The league's designed for everyone to be 8-8, right? So how are you going, well, I'm showing my age here. 8-9, 9-8. I started covering the league when it was 16 games, right? It's a much cleaner expression when it's 8-8. It's designed so if you think of like a bell-shaped curve, it's designed for everyone to be in the middle of that curve. You obviously want to be on one side of it. How do you make decisions that allow you to be on that side of it? And I'd like to think that I really captured that in this book.
For you, obviously every year is different in terms of who the team brings in and brings out. 2 years ago, these two teams met in the Super Bowl, rematch this year. How different is it? Where do you think the biggest differences lie from that game to what we'll see on Sunday?
Yeah, so I think the Eagles have the better roster. Kansas City has the better quarterback. Patrick Mahomes might be the best to ever do it. So it's like facing Michael Jordan in the NBA Finals. But I think if you just look at the roster, I think the Eagles are superior on both sides of the ball. And I think most people would tell you that, but the quarterback makes that much of a difference. The big difference from the Eagles, we talked about Saquon, is the upgrade from Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell to Saquon Barkley is huge. I think Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator, look, the Eagles have the number 1 defense in the NFL this year. He's done an outstanding job this year. But I don't think Kansas City's as strong, in particular on offense. You know, that if you just look at some of their at the advanced data of their offense back in 2022, that was a really strong group. Now their defense I think is better this year, but that I think there's more of the talent gap has closed and maybe edged more toward the Eagles than that game 2 years ago.
You spoke about Vic Fangio really quick there, but I want to go back to that because he was a bit of a controversial hire in the offseason. Coming in, he's an older defensive coordinator coach, and then he comes in and his defense is in the Super Bowl again. So I guess the biggest question coming into the season was how is he going to relate to some of the younger players being at the age that he's at? Yeah,
good. It's a good question, and the quick answer to that is my time. So I can't tell you what it's like to be in the head of a player, but in being around these guys for 13 years, there's 2 things they care about most, right? They want to do well so they get paid, support their family, get a big deal, and they want to win. And I think Vic Fangio allows them to do both, right? And so it's very cut and dry there. Now, he's a no-nonsense coach. Some people, I don't know how well it ended in Miami, to be honest with you. So some people might respond differently to coaching than others. But from the jump, the Eagles, he's been a real good fit for the defensive players. He's been a real good fit in the locker room. Schematically, he's maximized Zach Bond, who was a backup player. And the Eagles didn't sign Zach Bond to be a top linebacker, but he had an idea based on some past experiences with guys like Andrew Van Ginkel of how Zach Bond could be used. The Eagles hit in the first round with Quinyon Mitchell. And then, all the Georgia players that they have, I think those Georgia players were coached similarly at Georgia to the way Vic Fangio coaches. Actually, Vic Fangio has a good relationship with Kirby Smart, the head coach at Georgia. So I think Vic's been a really good fit. And then also Vic's from Dunmore, Pennsylvania. So if you're driving from Philly to Syracuse, you can get off an exit and get to Dunmore pretty quickly. It's right by Scranton, where who knows what Syracuse national champion basketball player grew up in Scranton?
Jerry McNamara.
Boom! There you go. Who said that? There you go.
Over
Well
here.
done. Yep. I covered Jerry for 2 years in college.
We could use a couple Jerry McNamaras on this year's team.
Yeah, Syracuse could for sure. So Vic, I think Vic wanted to be in Philly. I shouldn't have gone on that tangent. I think Vic wanted to be in Philly, and I think it's been a good match for both sides.
No, that's a good point because people in the offseason were curious as to why he left Miami for the same position with Philadelphia, and that's something that came up pretty quickly after the news broke was the older guy with a lot of family in the area, and it's been a really good marriage, and it's also a really good story for his defense that he's got potentially Brandon Graham back in the fold. Who would have thought after tearing his triceps in the middle of the season, one of the most highly respected players at that organization, obviously, but nobody really expected him to make this kind of comeback.
No, and Brandon so I'm in LA, November 23rd, if memory serves, and I'm in the locker room, and I'm talking to Brandon, and he says I'm done, right? And he thought he was out for the year, and he had said this was going to be the last year of his career. So like, wow, is this the end of his career, right? And this is like an all-time Eagle. When the Eagles won the Super Bowl 2018, the 17 season, the 18 Super Bowl, he had the strip sack on Tom Brady to clinch that, right? He's played more games in an Eagles uniform than anyone in franchise history, and he's a captain. He's an emotional leader. So you hear wow, I'm like that's a tough way to end. And then you start to hear whispers behind the scenes. You guys are reporters, you know what that's like. You hear whispers behind the scenes, probably around the holidays. Like, if they advance, he might come back. And the way this tends to work is that, like, if there's a story that is untrue, people are going to shoot it down quickly. If no one's kind of giving you an answer, it means that there's probably something there, right? And so you kept hearing that he could come back, and then sure enough, they after they won the NFC Championship game, I'm in the locker room talking to Brandon Graham, and he's like, I'll tell you tomorrow. The Eagles open his practice window. He's been practicing. I'm expecting Brandon Graham to play on Sunday.
Even if he's not the same player that he was 6-7 years ago when he was an all-pro caliber defensive end, what has he provided that locker room over the years?
Yeah, I mean, first off, you talk about the energy. He calls it good juju, right? He comes into work every day, and it's a good lesson for any line of work. Is he's someone you want to have in that locker room? Like he's full of energy every morning, even at this age. He's someone who his story is one that I think a lot of players can appreciate. He was considered a bust for the first 2 years of his career, for first 3 years of his career.
Yeah.
He really didn't hit his stride until a little later on, and that example's been used throughout the locker room with players who've either developed slowly or have gotten that bust label early on.
You have a favorite Brandon Graham story, just from all the years that you two have built a relationship?
I mean, I would say, look, there's some in the locker room, there's some on the field. From a football perspective, his trash talking is historic, right? Like, and he'll go out to the opening coin toss and he'll talk trash to the other people there. And the offensive lineman, like Jason Kelsey, used to say, "Brandon, shut up, man! Like, I gotta block this guy. Like, don't talk trash to Dexter Lawrence. You're not blocking him." I would say in the locker room, Brandon, he keeps receipts, but not just does he keep receipts. He'll manufacture it. So he'll walk by me as he's going in the locker and he said, "I know you picked against me. I know you picked against me." Right? And then just on a personal level, look, Brendan and I have, we're around the same age. I'm a little older than him, but we're around the same age. We have kids the same age. So, my son plays in the same flag football league as his son, right? So it's like it's cool on a personal level. You're experiencing a lot of things at the same time. And, when you cover a team, when you cover a team for 13 years, the faces change. Brandon's the only one who's still in there from when I took over on the beat in 2012. The only player, and that's pretty rare. So I would, like Fletcher Cox is retired, Jason Kelsey retired. Brandon's the only one left. So he's allowing me to feel young for like one more year, I guess, one more Super Bowl.
Sorry to go off on this Brandon Graham tirade, but I gotta ask, what is Brandon Graham the dad like? Like, cause you've seen him at the flag football league, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We.
Are your kids on the same team, or do they compete against each other?
No, they. A good question. They weren't on the same team this year. They competed against each other. Brandon's so nice. Like, he'll come over, say hello to my son. He's great there, and I'll be honest. Without compromising like personal conversations, I can learn about fatherhood from Brandon. In that, like, one of the things he always emphasizes is like, be present when you're there. So I've spoken to him about this. He has a demanding job, right? I don't want to say my job's as demanding as his, but I'm traveling the same times he is. So like, he'll the flag football games are on Friday nights, right? Or and if I'm traveling to Brazil for the season opener and we're both missing the first game of the season for flag football, and he's just like, "Man, you can't worry about that. When you're there, you got to be present." It's something that I actually think about whenever I'm with my son and my daughter.
Talking about the secondary, it's a pretty complete unit for Philadelphia this year. What can you tell me about what goes on inside that cornerback safety room, and also about Cooper DeJean and his kind of rise specifically?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part of the question first. In that Cooper, he got banged up during the summer, training back in Iowa. So he wasn't quite right during training camp. He actually didn't start practicing until the joint practices against the Patriots. So that was mid-August. The second preseason game was the Patriots one. So he didn't get on the practice field until then. His first game was the third preseason game. And so the first 4 weeks of the year, he was not in the lineup. Like, he was a special teams player, deep reserve. After the bye week, he joined the starting line, or he became the top nickel, and the Eagles have lost one game since then. And the defense has turned into the number one defense in the league. And I don't think it's because of Cooper DeJean, but he's a big part of that, right? The athleticism that he brings, the toughness that he brings, the size that he brings has been enormous for the Eagles. As far as that secondary group overall, yeah, I mean, they have their first-round pick, Quinyon Mitchell, on one side, then Darius Slay, who I think is playing his last game in an Eagles uniform on Sunday. That's been a real good corner combination. They brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who has really brought a certain type of energy and swagger to that back end, in addition to playmaking ability. Reed Blankenship's really settled in, and Vic Fangio, his concepts have just really meshed with this group as well.
Two more for you before we let you go, Zach. First, you've got two books, obviously. Were you caught off guard to see A.J. Brown reading a book on the sideline during a game this season?
I just wish he was reading my book, because I could have used those book sales, right? I mean, no, look, I was caught off. Well, I've seen A.J. with books before, right? I'm in the locker room every day, and A.J. is he's not just a bright guy; he's a thoughtful guy, right? And he's one of my favorite players to speak with, just because of how thoughtful he is. So I was not. I was surprised that he pulled it out in the middle of a game, but I wasn't surprised that he was reading a book, or that he was finding a way to center himself. But yeah, I mean, that book, Inner Excellence, shot up to #1 on the Amazon chart. So I could have used AJ's help for that, because I'm proud of my book, but it wasn't #1 on the Amazon charts.
All right, so we need to get him with the franchise, the Philadelphia Eagles, on the sideline during the Super Bowl, and then you really got to hit.
That would be awesome if that were to happen, yeah.
All right, we'll see what we can do on that side.
There you go.
Second for you. Coming up, draft after the season, obviously. You mentioned the Georgia connection on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe some Syracuse guys that Philadelphia should be looking at for next year?
Who do you think? Give me, because I've been watching the games, because Fran Brown is a Philly area guy. He's from Camden.
Yes, South Jersey.
He's from Camden. That is he was a big recruiter at Temple. I mean, I covered Hassan Reddick. Fran Brown brought him in. So when I recall being at the Daily Orange offices. At the time, it was 744 Ostrom Avenue. I know they've since moved, but
still on Ostrom though.
Still on Ostrom? Okay.
Yep.
What about I lived on Sumner, and I lived on Livingston.
There you go.
So that was a quick walk for me. Actually, if the landlord's listening to this, I have some issues with my house. And I would like to get my security deposit back.
Oh, wow. You've been waiting on that one.
Waiting on that one. With interest, please. Yeah.
Talk about holding on to receipts.
Yeah, seriously. But no, so Kyle McCord's a local guy.
Yeah.
I don't think the Eagles are going to draft a quarterback this year. We'll see. You're going on down the list. Let's see. I don't think LaQuinn Allen's going to be a top
Fidel
prospect.
Diggs, maybe.
Okay, yeah. And Diggs is a local guy.
Yeah.
He's a Philly guy. I've enjoyed watching Syracuse football this year. I think Jeff Nixon did a real good job with that offense.
He might. Well, who knows if he'll keep him? He's getting interviews. Texans just interviewed him to be the new OC.
Yeah, I think Syracuse will keep him this year.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Right.
But no, I mean, I say this respectfully to Fran and that staff. I think Syracuse has a way to go before being compared to that Georgia program.
Yeah.
But Fran did bring in a lot of the guys in that Georgia program, right? So there's a reason why Georgia's as good as they are.
I lied. I've got one more for
Anything.
you. All right.
And I'm happy to do Syracuse talk too.
Yeah, this is a Syracuse-related question.
Yeah.
You are both the WAER and the Daily Orange alum.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
And this weekend, on Saturday, will be the annual Media Cup basketball game inside the Dome between the two outlets. Can we get a prediction for you for the 2025 Media Cup?
A prediction. It's going to be well covered.
Zach Wolf's playing.
Okay. My loyalty. I haven't seen Nick Wright here yet. Nick and I work together at WAR. Danny Parkins, Andrew Filipponi.
Yes.
But they'll tell you my allegiance is with the Daily Orange, right? So, I'm proud of Syracuse alum. I'm a proud Newhouse alum, but I'm most proud of being a Daily Orange U alum, right? So, I don't know if the Daily Orange will win. We didn't usually win when I was there, but
Won last year.
We wrote the heck out of all our stories. So I'm really proud of my 4 years at Syracuse.
Awesome. Zach
Ian-
Berman picks the Daily Orange to win the Media Cup this year.
I'm
Ian
coaching
left
in
it
that
all
game.
on the court last year with
Did you?
the tie headband, if I do recall correctly.
I was a number 2 assistant to our head coach.
Yeah, okay.
Went down 20 points early, and I, X's and O's, drew up a couple special plays. We got back in the game. We didn't win the game.
Is the game still played at the Dome?
It
Yes.
is.
Still in the Dome.
Okay.
Friday night. Next Friday night.
Saturday night.
Or next Saturday night after. Look, I'm losing track of the days here.
Adrian Autry should watch you guys these players. So one of my first jobs out of college, I was at the Washington Post covering University of Virginia and Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech at the time, their head coach was Seth Greenberg, who's now on ESPN, but their assistant coach was Adrian Autry.
Right.
And if you had told me that Adrian would be the Syracuse coach 15 years later, I probably would have said what happened to Mike Hopkins. But no, I mean we'll see what happens there. Cayenne Anthony's coming next year,
Yeah,
right?
and Sadiq White,
There you go.
2 top
Okay.
50 guys.
There you go.
We'll see.
See if they can hang on to some of the strength that a
Yeah.
few strengths that they have on the squad right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I do have one more question
Anything,
for you about the
anything.
Eagles.
Happy to do this.
So Saquon comes back to Philly. What has he done for the city in his return coming home? And then kind of how important is it for him to be back there as well?
Yeah, so good question because he's from the Lehigh Valley. All right, he went to Whitehall High School, and I think that was a big part of the draw coming home. Obviously, $13 million a year helps. Joining that offensive line helps, but I do know from speaking to Saquon, speaking to his mother, speaking to people around him that the appeal of coming to Philly was like the full circle of coming home, right? He was born in New York. That's where he started his career. But then he moved to Pennsylvania. So same thing with his NFL career. He went to Penn State. He was a star at Penn State. Penn State is a big contingent in Philly, and I think that he's really become a fabric of I don't want to say fabric of the community, but he's been a big part of the city, the fan base, and so it doesn't surprise me how well he's taking to Philly.
Awesome. That's all we have for you, Zach. We're going to let
Can I
you
ask
go.
you guys real quick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where's the best pizza in Syracuse right now?
Probably not varsity, unfortunately.
Is ZJ
Pizza-
still open?
No, Pizza
No.
Cutters.
Man,
I mean,
Mario and
upscale-
Salvo's is
yeah.
very good also.
Okay.
Pizza Cutters and Mario and Salvo's.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
upscale, obviously, A Pizza Regional downtown is very
Okay.
good. But
We didn't make downtown when I was there very
yeah, it's
often.
across the street from Dinosaur Barbecue.
Okay. And is Chuck still going strong?
Like
Nope.
the
No.
bar?
Yeah.
No.
Man,
They tried to come back last year. It didn't go well.
How old do I sound right now? Right, I always thought I'm young. I'm 38. I graduated in 2008.
That's still
and
young.
None of those places.
When was the last
exist
time you
anymore.
were back?
The last one was back. So the Eagles the Eagles played the Bills in 2019,
Okay.
and I came
In
back
Buffalo.
in Buffalo,
Yeah.
and so I flew to Syracuse. I went to Fagan's.
That's still going strong.
Yeah.
Flip nights still exist.
Flip
Don't
on-
worry.
So Wednesday nights.
Yep.
So
Yep.
So my column used to appear at the Daily Orange every Wednesday, and people would go to Fagan's for the flip night. I would go because I wanted to see what people thought of my column. Yeah. So the last time I was back was 2019, but my son wants to come. My son wants to see a Syracuse game. So if it works out with the Eagles' schedule next year, I'm going to try to take him to a Syracuse game.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's great.
This has been great, Zach. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy
Absolutely.
the week. People go check out his new book, Philadelphia Eagles.
Is this broadcasted to people in Newhouse?
This is live on Z89 Airwaves.
Okay, so I want to tell everyone at Newhouse, honestly, when I was at Syracuse, I would email every single alum that I could find, Jeff Passan and Eli Saslow and Adam Kilgore. You go on down to I used Chico Harlan. I used to email all these guys. Pete Thamel. And so please, anyone at Syracuse, reach out. You can follow me on Twitter, X, at ZBERM. Send me a DM. I would give out my email address if you want. But yeah, reach out anytime because honestly, the connection to Newhouse and the Syracuse and the DO and WAR is something that's really dear to me.
Well, Zach, this
Thank
has been
you.
great
Thanks
to
so
have
much.
you.
Absolutely.
Eagles beat reporter for PHLY, and he'll be covering the big game this Sunday.